Every morning, nearly 10 million people wake up in one of the world's most powerful cities. The financial district alone handles trillions in transactions. The political elite gather in parliament. The cultural heartbeat of an entire nation pulses through its streets. Now imagine it's just gone. Not destroyed, not evacuated, just detached from the rest of the country. What happens to the 58 million people left behind? Because London isn't just a city in the United Kingdom. It's the engine that drives the country. It generates a quarter of the nation's entire wealth, handles more international finance than anywhere except New York, and pays for public services across the entire country. Without it, Britain doesn't just lose a capital. It loses its economic heart, its political center, and its seat at the table of global power. So, what would the United Kingdom actually look like if London were to disappear? Let's find out. To understand what Britain would lose, you first need to understand what London is. This square mile right here, it's not just old buildings and narrow streets. It's one of the three most important financial centers on the planet, alongside New York and Hong Kong. Every single day, more than $2.5 trillion in currency trades hands through these streets. HSBC, Barclays, Lloyd's of London, the Bank of England. If you've ever taken out a mortgage, used a credit card, or bought insurance, there's a decent chance a London institution was involved somewhere in that chain. But here's what makes London truly irreplaceable. Despite having less than 15% of the UK's population, London generates 23% of the entire nation's GDP. That's roughly $770 billion a year. And it's not just making that wealth, it's redistributing it. London sends tens of billions in tax revenue to the Treasury every year, which then funds schools in Yorkshire, hospitals in Wales, infrastructure in Scotland, and public services across Northern Ireland. So how did one city become this powerful? For centuries, London has been the center of British power and influence. It was the heart of the largest empire the world had ever seen. When that empire dissolved, London didn't shrink, it evolved. It became a nexus for international finance, a safe harbor for global capital, and a bridge between American markets and European business. Today, it's more than a city. It's a system. 6 international airports, with Heathrow alone moving 80 million passengers a year. A rail network where every major line in the country either starts or passes through London. The political machinery of Westminster. The global media power of the BBC. The creative industries of Soho, the research institutions of University College London and Imperial College. The list goes on. This isn't just a capital city. So when we ask what happens if London disappears, we're not just asking about a city. We're asking if the United Kingdom, as we know it, could even survive. Now here's where we set the rules. For this thought experiment, let's say London doesn't explode. Imagine it goes the way of Singapore, a city that broke away from Malaysia in 1965 and became its own independent nation. Greater London, all 10 million people, all 607 square miles, becomes its own sovereign city-state, its own currency, its own government, its own seat at the United Nations. And the rest of the United Kingdom? They wake up the next morning with 58 million people and a quarter of their economy gone. No grace period, no transition plan. No economic safety net, just Britain without London. So where do they even start? Day 1, the markets open, and they immediately realize what's happened. The FTSE 100 plunges. The pound drops against the dollar. International investors start pulling capital out of Britain at a pace not seen since the 2008 financial crisis. Because overnight, the United Kingdom just lost £770 billion in annual economic output. Think about that. Britain's GDP was roughly $3.3 trillion. Now it's $2.5 trillion. The UK just went from being the world's 6th largest economy to somewhere between France and India. And unlike those countries, Britain didn't build its economy to function without London. But the real catastrophe? It's not just the GDP. It's what happens when the financial services industry wakes up in a foreign country. Every major British bank now operates from a city that isn't part of the UK anymore. HSBC, Barclays, Lloyd's of London. They have 2 choices: stay in London and operate internationally, or relocate back into UK territory. Some will stay, but others? They'll scatter. Frankfurt gets the European Central Bank business. Paris attracts French firms back home. Dublin becomes the new English-speaking financial hub in the EU. Amsterdam takes the trading infrastructure. And then comes the tax problem. Remember, London wasn't just wealthy. It was a net contributor. It paid far more in taxes than it received in government spending. That surplus, tens of billions of pounds every year, subsidized the rest of the country. The Northeast receives £3,000 more per person in public spending than it generates in taxes. Wales, £4,000 more per person. Northern Ireland, nearly £5,000 more. All of that was balanced out by London's surplus. Now, that money's gone. So the British government faces an impossible choice. Option 1, raise taxes dramatically. Income tax, VAT, corporate tax, everything goes up just to maintain current spending levels. But the economy is already shrinking. Raising taxes in a recession makes things worse. Businesses leave, unemployment rises. The tax base shrinks even further. Option 2, cut spending. Slash budgets for the NHS, schools, infrastructure, pensions, defense. But that triggers a downward spiral. Worse public services mean lower quality of life, which drives away the skilled workers and businesses you desperately need to rebuild the economy. There's no good answer, just varying degrees of pain. Manchester and Birmingham promise they can absorb the financial sector. Edinburgh's banking legacy makes it a natural successor. But here's the problem. It takes decades to build what London has. The fiber optic cables, the office space, the legal infrastructure, the talent pool, the international schools for bankers' kids, the Michelin-starred restaurants where deals get made, the luxury housing, the cultural amenities that make a city attractive to global elites. London didn't become London overnight. It took 300 years of empire, 70 years of post-war financial evolution, and billions in infrastructure investment. Manchester has potential. Birmingham has ambition, but neither has time. The UK needs to replace London's economic output now, not in 20 years. And that's just not physically possible. So for the first 5 years, maybe 10, the rest of Britain endures what economists would politely call a severe adjustment period. The rest of us would just call it a recession. But money isn't everything. Because when people around the world think of Britain, they're not thinking about GDP figures or tax revenue. They're thinking about this. And almost all of it is in London. Let's start with football. The Premier League is the most watched sports league on the planet. It's broadcast in 212 territories and generates £3 billion a year in TV rights alone. It's Britain's greatest cultural export since the Beatles. And look at this. 7 of the 20 clubs are in London. Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, 3 of the league's historic giants, now playing in a different country. Do they stay? Do they relocate? Does the league even survive the chaos of having more than a third of its teams suddenly on the other side of an international border? Then there's the BBC. The British Broadcasting Corporation doesn't just broadcast to Britain, it broadcasts British values to the world. The BBC World Service reaches 468 million people every week. It's trusted, it's influential, and it's headquartered in London. Relocating it isn't like moving a bank. You're talking about studios, production facilities, thousands of journalists, entire archives of programming. And even if you move it to Manchester or Glasgow, it's not the BBC anymore, is it? Now let's talk about what this does to British education. The London School of Economics, Imperial College London, University College London, King's College London. These aren't just schools, they're global research powerhouses. They generate billions in research funding, attract the brightest minds from every continent, and produce Nobel Prize winners. Britain's universities bring in £42 billion to the UK economy every year, and a massive chunk of that comes from international students who specifically want to study in London. Without access to London, how many of them choose Edinburgh or Manchester over MIT or Stanford, over ETH Zurich or the Sorbonne? The brain drain doesn't just hurt the economy, it signals something worse. Britain is no longer a premier destination for global talent. And then there's the West End. London's theatre district rivals Broadway. It draws 15 million visitors a year and generates £1.3 billion for the economy. Hamilton, The Phantom of the Opera, Les Miserables, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, all of it, now in a foreign city. And while we're on tourism, 30 million people visit London every year. They come for the Tower of London, the British Museum, Buckingham Palace, Platform 9 3/4. They spend £15 billion. And that money doesn't just stay in London. It flows through the entire UK tourism industry. Visit London, then take a train to Edinburgh. See the capital, then rent a car and tour the Cotswolds. But if London's no longer part of Britain, that whole tourism ecosystem fractures. London Fashion Week, £32 billion. Fashion industry, gone. Now we get to the most volatile question of all. Who's in charge? Because the seat of British government for the past 800 years is now in a foreign country. The cabinet, the civil service, the Supreme Court, every institution of British governance, they all need to relocate. Immediately. But where? Birmingham makes the most practical sense. It's centrally located, it's the UK's second largest city. It already has the infrastructure. HS2 was designed to connect it to London, but now it could serve as the spine of a new capital. The economy is diverse: manufacturing, services, finance. There's space to build. The local government has been begging for this kind of investment for decades. But here's the problem. Birmingham doesn't have the prestige. It's seen as industrial, working class, regional. Making it the capital would be symbolically underwhelming. It's practical, not inspirational. Manchester has a different pitch. It's already positioning itself as the capital of the North. Media City UK houses BBC operations. It's got world-class universities, a thriving tech scene, international airport connectivity. For years, politicians have talked about the Northern Powerhouse, rebalancing Britain's economy away from London. Well, now they have to deliver. Manchester has the culture, the global brand, the infrastructure, but it's also geographically lopsided. Move the capital that far north and you risk alienating the entire southern half of England. And Scotland starts asking, why aren't we the capital? Edinburgh, historically significant, architecturally stunning, already the capital of Scotland. And crucially, it has a financial sector that survived when London wasn't around. Edinburgh was a banking powerhouse long before London dominated. Royal Bank of Scotland, Bank of Scotland, Standard Life. The expertise is already there. But making Edinburgh the capital of the United Kingdom creates a massive political problem. It might accelerate Scottish independence. Think about it. Scotland suddenly becomes the economic and political center of the UK. Edinburgh booms with investment, jobs, and prestige. Meanwhile, England is reeling from economic collapse, tax hikes, and service cuts. At that point, why would Scotland stay in a union where they're now the ones carrying everyone else? Ironically, making Scotland the center of the UK might be the very thing that destroys the UK. There's one more option. A dark horse candidate, York. Historically important, once the second city of England. Geographically balanced between north and south. Culturally significant. Small enough to build something new without displacing millions. It's the compromise choice. Not too northern, not too southern. Historic enough to have gravitas, but not so entrenched in its identity that it resists transformation. Building a new government quarter in York would be expensive, tens of billions, but it might be the only option that doesn't trigger regional resentment or constitutional crisis. And then there's the other political crisis no one wants to talk about. What happens to the monarchy? Buckingham Palace is in London. Windsor Castle is technically on the border. The crown has been inseparable from London for centuries. Do they stay in London and become monarchs of a foreign city-state? Do they relocate to Edinburgh and risk looking like they're picking sides in the independence debate? Do they move to a new capital and abandon centuries of tradition? There's no good answer, just the slow realization that even Britain's most stable institution, the crown itself, gets destabilized when London disappears. So here's what you end up with. A government in flux, regions competing for dominance, Scotland eyeing the exit, the monarchy in an identity crisis, and a country that's supposed to be united suddenly discovering just how fragile that union really was. Now let's zoom out, because while Britain is tearing itself apart over where to put the new capital and how to pay for basic services, the rest of the world is watching and recalculating. Let's start with the most prestigious club in international politics, the UN Security Council. There are 5 permanent members with veto power: the United States, China, Russia, France, and Britain. Britain earned that seat in 1945 because it was still a superpower. It had the world's largest empire, significant military might, and economic clout. It was one of the victors that shaped the post-war order. But now, without London, Britain's GDP drops below India's, below Brazil's, below Italy's. Its military budget, already under strain, faces massive cuts because the tax base just collapsed. So other countries start asking the uncomfortable question: why does Britain still have a permanent seat, and we don't? Britain doesn't lose the seat overnight. International institutions move slowly, but the legitimacy of that seat, that erodes quickly. And when you're sitting at the table, but everyone knows you're only there because of history, not current power, you stop getting listened to. Then there's NATO. Britain has always been one of NATO's cornerstone members. The nuclear deterrent, the special forces, the aircraft carriers, the intelligence sharing relationship with the United States. But here's the problem. NATO members are supposed to spend 2% of GDP on defense. Britain has struggled to maintain that even with London's tax revenue. Now, they're facing a choice between funding the NHS and funding the military, between keeping schools open and keeping submarines operational. And when Britain can't pull its weight militarily anymore, the special relationship with the United States starts to feel a lot less special. Let's talk about that relationship. For decades, Britain has positioned itself as America's closest ally, the bridge between the US and Europe, the English-speaking partner with shared intelligence, shared values, and shared history. Britain is part of Five Eyes, the most exclusive intelligence-sharing network on the planet. But a huge chunk of Britain's intelligence capability? It's in London. GCHQ has major operations there. MI6 headquarters, the analysts, the linguists, the tech infrastructure. What happens when your primary intelligence hub is in what's now a foreign city? Do you relocate and lose operational capability for years? Do you negotiate access and risk security breaches? Meanwhile, the Americans are hedging their bets. If Britain can't be relied on for military support, intelligence, or even economic stability, why not strengthen ties with Germany instead, or France, or go directly to the EU? The special relationship doesn't end with a dramatic breakup. It just fades, slowly, quietly, until one day, Britain realizes it's no longer being invited to the rooms where decisions get made. And then there's trade. Remember, Britain already left the European Union. The pitch was global Britain, freed from Brussels, able to negotiate trade deals on its own terms with the entire world. But trade negotiations are about leverage. The bigger your market, the better your deals. A UK without London is a $2.5 trillion economy negotiating with the US, $28 trillion, China, $18 trillion, and the EU, $17 trillion. They're not negotiating as equals. They're negotiating from weakness. So Britain gets worse terms, higher tariffs on exports, fewer protections for services, less access to markets. And when British businesses can't compete internationally, more jobs lost, more tax revenue gone. The downward spiral accelerates. So here's what Britain becomes: a mid-sized European economy. Think Denmark, think the Netherlands, think Austria. Still wealthy by global standards, still democratic, still educated, still with a high quality of life, but no longer a player, no longer setting the agenda at G7 summits, no longer shaping international security policy, no longer deciding how global finance works. Instead of making the news, Britain is reacting to it. And in a world dominated by the United States, China, and the European Union, small countries don't write the rules. They follow them. But here's the thing. This isn't all bad. For 50 years, politicians talked about leveling up Britain's regions, and nothing happened. Investment kept flowing to London. But now, the government has no choice. Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, Glasgow, they finally get the infrastructure spending they've been promised for decades. Housing becomes affordable. London's average home price was £535,000, an entire generation locked out of ownership. But when the economy shrinks, housing demand collapses. By 2030, prices drop 35% across the southeast. First-time buyers can actually afford homes. Developers build affordable housing because there's no market for luxury flats anymore. Political power decentralizes. Regional mayors get real budgets. Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland gain genuine autonomy. Parliament becomes more representative. Fewer London elites. More people from working-class backgrounds. There's even an environmental benefit nobody wanted. A smaller economy means smaller emissions. Net zero targets that were impossible in 2025 become achievable by 2045. But let's be clear, none of these benefits are worth £770 billion a year in lost GDP. None of them is worth 2 decades of recession. None of them is worth losing Britain's seat at the global table. The silver linings exist, but they're consolation prizes, not victories. They're what you find when you're forced to rebuild from the rubble. So here's the uncomfortable truth this thought experiment reveals. London isn't just part of the United Kingdom. London is the United Kingdom. 23% of the economy, the seat of government, the financial capital, the cultural brand, the global gateway, the reason other countries take Britain seriously, all in one city. Remove London, and Britain doesn't just lose a city. It loses the core around which the entire nation is organized. Now, to be clear, this will never actually happen. London isn't going to declare independence. This is a thought experiment, not a prediction. So the real question isn't, what if London left? It's, how do you build a nation that can survive without its most powerful city? There's no easy answer, but what this thought experiment proves is this. Britain and London aren't just connected, they're dependent. And maybe that's the most important insight of all. Not that Britain would collapse without London, but that Britain was built over centuries to be impossible without London. And you can't undo 300 years of history without paying a price that lasts for generations.